My lords, I too am most grateful to the noble Lord Shinkwin, for introducing this bill into your lordship's house. My understanding that the particular focus of this bill is particularly on the principles of disability equality, and not on some underhand attempt to seek to limit women's access to abortion services. Of course, noble lords will have a variety of opinions with regard to the ethics of abortion, but that is not in principle the focus of this bill, I believe. Of course, it needs to be said that in general, the churches and other faith groups, historically and indeed today, have always maintained a somewhat cautious approach as to how the rights of women on the one hand and the rights of the unborn child can somehow be maintained without hopefully falling in to those who reside at the extremes of arguments around ethics on both sides of this debate. My lords, our debate today is effectively restricted to whether or not we ought to remove one ground for permitting abortions to take place from the 1967 legislation. I quote that there is a substantial risk that if the child were born, it would suffer from such physical or mental abnormalities as to be seriously handicapped. Given the nature of the remaining grounds for abortion, as the noble Lord Shinkwin has implied, it is unlikely that if this bill were to become law, the numbers of terminations of pregnancy would significantly decrease. The Department of Health, in its commentary on 2015 abortion statistics, implied that unquantified but notable numbers of abortions where fetal abnormalities were present were conducted on other grounds, most probably that of injury to the mental health of the pregnant woman. It is reasonable, therefore, to conjecture that if Clause 1D were to be removed from the Act, many such pregnancies could, and no doubt would, still be terminated under other existing provisions. That might be a matter either for reassurance or regret for noble lords, but I think that particular discussion lies beyond our remit. Why then, my lords, do we seek to amend the Abortion Act? The answer is that the principle of disability equality is essential. It is essential for the welfare of individuals living with disability, and it is equally essential for a society that wishes not only to protect, but to celebrate the lives of those with disabilities. My lords, many of us looked at our television screens just days ago and saw the joy of the crowd and the joy of athletes, both able and disabled. The joy of those athletes and the joy of the crowd in celebration of their achievements. There is something profoundly worrying in our current contradictory stance, which says that people living with disability are valued, respected, and cherished, but that disability, in and of itself, represents a valid ground for abortion. In the end, there is a world of difference between an abortion taking place because of a diagnosis of fetal disability adversely affects the mental health of the pregnant woman, and stating that fetal disability is, and of itself, a ground for abortion. As other noble lords have mentioned, by way of example, I'd like to pursue just one pertinent area further, and that of the Down syndrome community. That there are challenges to be met in caring for a child with Down syndrome is undeniable. I suppose it could be said, and as the father of 5 children, without in any way seeking to minimize the impact of a diagnosis for Down syndrome parents, my experience as a father is there are challenges in caring for all children. But neither would I want to minimize the joy that many parents receive from sharing their lives with Down syndrome children. The recent TV program that Sally Phillips made, I think, made that point very clearly. For those of you who, like me, are addicts to the TED website and TED Talks, there is a very compelling talk on there by a young disability rights campaigner, Karen Gaffney, who herself is Down syndrome. She is an Olympic gold medal swimmer and has, I think, swum 16 times across the Bay of San Francisco. A feat, I gather, that none of the inhabitants of Alcatraz successfully managed. Not only children, but adolescents and adults with Down syndrome also live valued and valuable lives, contributing greatly to the welfare of those around them. All of this is, I believe, undermined by the continued existence on our statute books of a law that in effect states that Down syndrome in and of itself is a ground for abortion. My lords, the current debate with regard to non-invasive prenatal testing, NIPT, recently the subject of a consultation by the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, brings a new urgency to this issue. NIPT screens for genetic conditions such as Down syndrome can now be carried out by means of a simple blood test from 10 weeks of pregnancy. This procedure is more accurate than the previously available early screening tests and does not carry with it the risk of miscarriage because of its invasive nature. If either through the NHS or through commercial companies, it becomes routine for pregnant women to undergo this form of screening, it could have extreme consequences not only for the numbers of Down syndrome children to be born, but also for society's attitudes to those who are born, not merely with Down syndrome, but people with disability in general. My lords, I congratulate the noble Lord Shinkin, for bringing this issue to the attention of the House. And I hope that regardless of our, no doubt, diverse views on the ethics of abortion, we can unite together to give this bill a second reading in the interests of disability equality.